In August 21st, 2020, professional Street Fighter V player and major tournament champion, Punk, was punished for his unsportsmanlike conduct towards Alex Myers and Alex Valle, following his loss in an online tournament. He would start at a disadvantage in his next major tournament, being placed in losers as punishment. While some people understood and accepted the consequences of his behavior, some players claimed that this was harsh because he later apologized, while some others claimed it was too easy on him and that Capcom was going easy on him as a result of his current status in the FGC. Personally, I don't really have an opinion on the punishment. However, what did pique my interest were the things that were being said by Punk to the two people he was flaming over Discord and Twitter, prior to him apologizing for this behavior. In response, Valle, among accepting the apology, then added that trash talking should stay within the game and not be taken to a personal level, or else there may be potential harm to the community as a whole. From this, I began to recall some of my own experiences in the Australian FGC, which helped me form my own ideas about different communities. The first time I attempted to be a part of the community was when Street Fighter V came out. I was told by a friend of mine to make an appearance and that it would be fun, so I went. When I got there, I started chatting with people and making friends, the usual stuff you'd expect. However, when it came time to play, I played with my friend and he stomped me, and that I was fine with. What he did though was rub it in my face very loudly and anyone else he beat. Suffice to say, his behavior left more of an impression on me than anything else I had experienced that day. When I got home later that day, I thought to myself, wow, what a toxic community. This is not a community I want to be a part of in the long run, and I never turned up for another event for about 3 years. Looking back, perhaps I was too quick to judge, but put yourself in my shoes for a moment. This had been my first interaction with this community, and the positive first impression quickly turned into a negative one, and this didn't really give me much motivation to continue making appearances. About 3 years later, I had decided to make another appearance after a streamer told me about the community, so I decided to give it another shot by going onto socials, looking out for any upcoming events, and chatting with the community itself. That wasn't until something happened on one of the community social channels. Someone was saying some really personal stuff about me based on my playstyle without him realizing I was there, and I had just played against him online. So I decided to just say hello and explain that it was me and wish him good games, despite him still beating me in the end. From that point onwards, the person completely changed their tune. From my perspective, I just found it weird that only when I was present he was acting so nice, as though if I wasn't present he would take every opportunity to trash me. Nevertheless, I decided to head to locals, and though I had my own reservations regarding my previous experiences 3 years ago, I actually enjoyed myself, and the community there were really nice and welcoming to a new player such as myself. Most notably, that dude wasn't there to be an ass to everyone including me. About the same time, I was keeping quiet online about my identity. I felt it was a good idea to do, since I could just leave the community without people knowing who I was if my experience at the locals was a poor one. I later found out that some of the more colourful part of the community, including the streamer who encouraged me to take part in locals, had actually been trying to find out my identity, despite how much I wanted my privacy to be respected. As if that wasn't bad enough, it turns out someone else who I respected a great deal in the game was also trashing me on socials on a personal level, despite not knowing me. What exactly did those people plan on doing once they found out who I was? What was that respected player planning to do if he or his friends told him who I was? I didn't enjoy the idea of these sorts of people knowing where I lived or who I was, personally. Or, to quote Seth in his Space Station 13 video,
I hate having cum delivered to my mailbox and would prefer to keep it that way.
At this point I realized that it may be better that I don't actually take an active position in this community, because if the respected players and the community in general behave in this way, I don't have to deal with them. Subsequently, I decided to take a very distant approach to the Australian FGC and only involve myself in very rare occasions. After what happened between Punk and Valle and what Valle said in response, I started to wonder. I can't be the only one who has had these sorts of experiences in the FGC, much less the Australian one. So I started asking people about their experiences in the Australian FGC, and I got some very interesting responses. I won't go through every single detail of what was said in these interviews, because there was a lot, but I will highlight what I felt were the most important parts. I interviewed a total of 7 people, 5 of whom had in-depth written or audio responses. Among other things, I asked these people what their most negative experiences in their respective communities were. Interestingly, similar to my own experiences, the online personal trash talking popped up in many of their responses.
Like, it's already hard enough, to get into a tight group of people offline and hang out with them without all of these extra, Discord arguments and things happening, So I always wonder if maybe it's held back a little bit by that.
Some of the people that I interviewed actively avoid the online community, despite how much they give details on offline events, because they would rather not deal with the online community at all. Some participants conceded to the fact that they hated the online community because of their behavior towards other players. For example, Player B would see that Player A was talking badly about somebody else. As a result, Player B would see how someone might direct these insults at him, and shy away from ever being a part of that community. Sorry, a bit of a long story, but, you know.
I like it.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I've seen it a lot. Sucks that you definitely had that happen, I guess, you know. But I've seen it multiple times.
I personally know several people who have actively avoided the offline community because of these types of online behaviors. And of course, I am one of them. Another idea that kept coming up were the concept of clique groups. For those of you that don't know, they are smaller groups within communities that still operate throughout the entire community. Within the Australian FGC, many people have expressed their dislike towards these clique groups. Now personally, I don't believe I've really had an opinion or experience with clique groups, but the more that I think about it, it is entirely possible that the people who are bashing me online may have been directing it within their subgroups. And some of my participants have even told me that these groups claim to be welcoming to newer players, yet they will actively bash any players that they come up against. Another participant had this to share.
Like, they kind of seemed like unapproachable.
Oh.
Like, a lot of these people, like, I'm friends with now. But back then, like, I didn't feel like I could talk to them.
Oh.
You know what
That's
I mean? Like, they were just like, they
were
had
like
their own, like, little clique, I guess. You know, like, they were like their own group.
The idea that certain cliques would, on the outside, seem unapproachable because of the fact that they are part of this entirely other group from the community while still being within the community is certainly something to think about. From these, it is certainly within the realm of possibility that some people may be deterred from engaging with the community as a result of these clique groups in several different ways. Next thing I want to talk about is how one interaction with certain people may shape one's own perceptions of an entire group. Like my own experiences, whereby one person's actions shaped my perceptions of the entire community negatively, I would later find many people having similar experiences. One participant had this to say.
Like you said, right, like you had one bad experience and that was enough to turn you off. That's all that matters. Like, first impressions is so important. And if you can have one good experience as your first experience, like it can flip that entire thing on its head.
Some of my participants had negative interactions with single people, or single bad experiences within the community. In response, some of them did associate this experience with the rest of the community, much like I had done all that time ago. From the interviews I'd conducted, I found that it is entirely possible that if you are a part of a community, your actions may have an impact on people's perceptions of the community if they find out that you are a part of it. Mine and many others' opinions of the community were very much influenced by these sorts of experiences. Naturally, there are many others who actively take part in the community despite this behavior, and of course, conversely, of the people I interviewed, some did mention that positive experiences with individuals helped shape their perceptions of the community positively. Nevertheless, I thought this would be a good point to highlight since I did notice this trend in some of the interviews. Moving on, I want to talk about what Valle said about keeping trash talk within the game. As previously said, people have said some really personal stuff about me online based on my playstyle, and this eventually was the reason I left entirely. Interestingly, the people who agreed to do an interview with me did not share my own experience with regards to this. More notably, the many people who declined my interview declined because of how the community might try to track them down or retaliate in some way. What exactly did they experience or see in the community that made them concerned about such behavior? I don't know. However, I will leave this up to interpretation. One thing I can say for certain is that based on my own experiences, I have to agree with what Valle said, as these personal attacks on me are what caused me to turn my back on the community. Despite my bad experiences, I personally knew the better side of the community as well, and many of the people that I had met from what few events I went to, I still keep in contact with today, because they were some of the nicest people I've ever met. This got me thinking. Who were the people that comprised the FGC, and what experience did they have that was so different from mine? They gave me some very interesting responses. A very common reason was the actual people that were already in the FGC. One story in particular I feel illustrates what I'm about to bring to light. One of the people I interviewed mentioned their first experience with the Street Fighter 4 community. He played against another player who had played an extra long set with him to help him settle in. The other player also used this 27-round game to explain how everything worked around the community and build a rapport with this new player. I began to reflect upon my own experiences, and I began to wonder, what if I had experienced the FGC differently for my first impression?
You know, like, they talk to someone who, like, encourages them.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't rub it in their face. And, like, I think we're all guilty of this.
Yeah.
Like, I know I've turned people away on my stream for, like, winding them up. But on the flip side, there was a guy that came to my locals, maybe about a year ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, hey, like, a lot of my friends play Tekken, but, like, I kind of, like, really interested in Street Fighter. And I sat down with him.
Yep.
And I pretty much played, like, a set versus him, using, like, every character in the roster.
Oh, wow. Alright.
And I beat him on, like, every single guy. But, you know, like, I felt like it was like, in the nature of, like, good fun, and, like, encouraging him, and, like, I didn't do it in a sense of, like, I want to beat you with every character. It was
more
I
to
want
give
to show you, like, the breadth of the game. That guy that I said, like, I sat there and I played with him, and, like, got, like, everyone versing him.
Yep.
He kept showing up to locals every single month, I think it was,
Oh.
the monthly. Over, like, the last year, like, he has evolved into, like, an incredible player.
Oh.
He's getting, like, top 8s and stuff in, like, the
Really?
local, like, online scenes and stuff, yeah. And, like, yeah, like, a week later, like, I, like, actually had to, like, try using, like, the whole roster, and then, like, the month after that, like, I had to, like, I couldn't use, like, any of my, like, joke characters, you know, like, I only
Yep.
have to play, like, the characters, like, I kind of knew.
Alright, that's fair.
I'm like, yeah, like, he got really involved. That's all that matters. Like, first impressions are so important. And if you
Yeah.
can have one good experience as your first experience, like, it can flip that entire thing on its head.
The same way I spoke earlier about how my first experience with the community stopped me from going again for another 3 years, was the reason this person and many others chose to keep going. Perhaps these first experiences are vital in leaving an impression on newer people in the community. Regardless, I felt first impressions were quite an interesting point when it came to attitudes towards a community. Once again, as one participant said,
That's all that matters. Like, first impressions are so important. And if you can have one good experience as your first experience, like, it can flip that entire thing on its head.
The next thing I wish to share links back to the situation with Punk, whereby he was held accountable for his behavior towards Myers and Valle by Capcom. Some of my participants have expressed some concerns with regarding accountability in the FGC for things such as unprofessional behavior. For example, some participants have seen a lot of negative behaviors, including racist remarks, get swept under the rug simply because of personal friendships that they have with others in the community.
This is the point, is, like, everyone needs, like, accountability. Like, if this is a community you care about, like, you need to think about these things. I've had to deal with this stuff. Like, there have been multiple times when, like, I've said something, like, super dumb, and, like, you know, it's influenced someone negatively. And, like, that's not what I want, that's not what they want. There is a guy, luckily he still plays.
Yep.
But I went to BAM, this was my first BAM, and he was, like, really excited to see me, and I was like, hey, like, do you want to play some sets?
Alright.
But I beat him, and, like, I don't know what was going through my head at the time. And I said, quote unquote, I thought you were better than this. You know, like, even though, like, I wasn't kind of attacking him personally, I'm not saying, like, you're a crap person and I don't enjoy playing with you and, like, this is a waste of... Like, I never said any of that. Like, I never meant that. But, like, that's what it felt like to him.
From my research, do I believe everyone should be held accountable for this type of behavior? I honestly have no idea. To be honest, I hadn't even thought of this prior to my research, though it is still something to think about. I feel it is necessary to add from my interviews another key point in particular, as this came up very frequently during my research: offline events, or more specifically, OHN. I never went to OHN myself, but I just found it fascinating how much everyone enjoyed and talked about it. With the amount of people that were talking about this event in their interviews as their most notable positive experience in the community, it made me a little upset that I never experienced it myself. But I digress. They gave me many different reasons for this, such as how it felt inclusive, how people felt it was a place to make new friends and connect with the broader community, and, overall, how it was a fun event. From this, I suppose I would like to highlight the importance of offline events, and how these are a great way to bring new people into the scene. These people had such a good experience with the offline scene, and though I hadn't been to OHN myself, I have to agree that, with the exception of my first one, Offline events were definitely a positive experience for myself as well. Now, on the topic of this, I just want to take a moment to express how much the people within the community have positively influenced many people's perceptions of the Australian FGC, including my own, many of whom I keep in contact with even today, as I previously mentioned. This was further shown through the interviews I had conducted. Some of the people I interviewed going as far as to say that they hope to be friends for life with some of the members of the community, even beyond the FGC. Perhaps I'm being a bit nitpicky by including this next point made by a single person. However, when I heard this point, I felt it would be necessary to include, just as a possible idea. They mentioned that they had been to several events whereby people tapped others on the shoulders if they wanted to play games.
Just as like a general thing, like people don't share setups enough in the FGC. I'm like a real shy guy, and like I'll sit behind someone playing for like a first to 20 or something. And then they'll be like, "Oh, I gotta go drink." I'm like, "All right, I'll hop on." You know, and like I hate this mentality of like you have to tap someone on the shoulder and like be annoying and be like, "Hey, can I play?" And you compare that with Japan, and it's all like super structured. It's like every setup is first to 2. If you lose, get off. You know, sick. You know.
Another participant had this to say. Just to clarify, you were a bit daunted at the
absolutely.
Start. Okay.
Yeah, 100%. And that went on for a long time. That wasn't a short thing.
I see.
It's daunting going into such a big community.
I haven't personally experienced fear in asking people for games during these events. However, based on interviews, I can definitely see this as a possibility in the FGC. From all of my research and my own analysis of the results, I'd like to summarize a few key points that I think everyone can get behind. My perceptions and the perceptions of many people from their respective communities were swayed by the actions of people in the community directed at them, as well as behaviors within the community itself. From this, I suggest that everyone in a community, I feel, has an obligation to be good towards everyone else in their community and to new people, regardless of whether or not it is online or in person.
It is our duty as like members of our community to like look after the community.
Oh, 100%.
You know, it's not like it's just the figurehead. It's not just like Alex Valle's problem to like make every single new person like feel welcome, right? Like think about the community.
Furthermore, the moment an onlooker of a community finds out that someone is a part of a community, it is entirely possible for them to associate that person's behavior to the rest of the community. This may swing well or poorly based on the circumstance. However, I hope that what was covered previously illustrates some ways in which this can be the case.
Some people have really good experiences. That's because the people that they talk to, like out of luck, they talk to someone who like encourages them.
Yeah.
Like doesn't rub it in their face.
I sort of agree with this. Perhaps, out of luck, me and many others had terrible experiences. However, I feel as well, to a certain extent at least, people can control these moments. Each individual may be responsible for how a community is perceived. Naturally, I'm not discounting the many people who have had really positive experiences in this community. However, I suggest that everyone keep this in mind moving forward, as your actions may strongly influence the growth of the group. With regards to clique groups, I feel it is necessary to say that though they are a part of their own subgroup, they may still hold power to influence people's perception on the broader community, because they still act within that community. With regards to what Valle said about keeping trash talk within the game, I 100% agree on this and can relate my own experiences with it, as well as the experiences of many others. Bringing the trash talk to a personal level over a game is something you definitely do not want to do, as it may harm the community as a whole.
It's only a game. Why you have to be mad?
Once again, something to consider is that it is a daunting experience to join a new community, which may be made harder with the need to gather the courage to ask for games or to join in. Perhaps some system could be implemented to help with this, but again, this is more just food for thought. Personally, I haven't had this trouble during my offline events, but I can see it being the case. I leave that up to you to decide. The final point I would like to highlight is the idea of accountability for certain behaviors in different communities. Maybe what happened to Punk was justified, maybe it wasn't. But the idea that people may be excused for their damaging behavior as a result of their connections or position in a community is entirely possible. I'm not saying everyone should look over their shoulders and be paranoid of everything that they say, but once again I just want you to think about this. Lastly, I wish to just say that though my experiences were poor by my own standards, there are many other people who have found a strong sense of belonging and positivity from the Australian FGC.
Alright, so just like the FGC is mostly pretty awesome. Go to your locals, meet people, Play people online regularly if you like don't have those experiences. Get around the games, get around the communities if you want to, and if you want to try to, I suggest you try it at least first.
Yeah.
There's no negatives, I think, about diving into the fighting games in FGC, at least in Australia. And if anything bad does happen, I think the best way to get over issues, personally, is to meet people in real life or directly talk to them on a Discord, because gamers don't talk directly to their opponent in person. Even if they do think their opponent's trash, it's very rare that someone will talk actual direct to someone in person. And yeah, other than that, I think it's mostly an awesome place. I've been a part of it for a good few years now, and from my own experiences, I think definitely it's worth giving it a shot for everybody before you write it off.
As far as I'm concerned, however, I wish not to make an active return to the Australian FGC based on my own personal experiences. Who knows, maybe yours will be different, or maybe you've already made an attempt. Maybe you have had it far better than me, or maybe you've had it way worse than me. There are many communities out there willing to take in new people. Which community you choose to join, if any, is completely up to you. If I could offer some advice, it would be this. If you choose to join a community that makes you happy. Before I finish up, I would just like to say, I made many points in this video. Maybe you agree with all of them, maybe you agree with none. Maybe you agree with only some of the points I made through my research. I leave this decision up to you. After all, my biggest regret doing this is that I couldn't interview as many people as I had wanted. I'm almost certain that I could have gotten more information and ideas if I had interviewed more people, and for something like this, more perspectives are a good idea. Sadly, however, this is as far as my interviews take me. I hope that from everything I've talked about, I've provided something of benefit to you watching this. Special thanks to everyone who helped me make this project, links of whom I will provide in the comments below, provided they have asked me to link anything. Hopefully, more questionable content to come, and please share this around. This took me a very long time to make, and I hope it was worth it. For now though, thank you all so much for joining me today.
Shout out to Kate Spy 111.
And I'll see you next time.